Hi everyone, my name is Leanne and today I'm going to be telling you about how I read so much. We are coming towards the new year, or maybe by the time I upload this we will be into the new year, but that is the time where a lot of people are setting resolutions, and I know a really common resolution is to read more, and hopefully I can give you guys some tips on how you can achieve this. For a bit of context, this year I have read over 150 books. Last year I read 108 books. The year before that I read 140 books. And in 2015 I read 63 books. And I kind of want to focus on what I did in 2015 to increase my reading first of all, because I think that is really good solid advice for how you can encourage yourself to read more. Now at the point where reading over 100 books a year is not something that I find particularly difficult. There were a few things that I made a conscious effort to do in order to achieve that. But what I will also say is that that's a lot of books. I'm aware that that's a lot of books. And I also want to say that just because someone reads a large quantity of books does not mean that they are reading those books critically. It doesn't mean that that's an enriching or entertaining or enjoyable experience for them. I'm extremely fortunate in that I am a very fast reader. I always have been. So I'm very fortunate in that I still do really enjoy and take in the reading experience, even though I'm reading very quickly. Not about reading over 100 books. That is a lot of books. I think you should just focus on a goal that is achievable for you. It's a cliche, but it is quality over quantity. Anyways, so 2015 was my second semester of my first year of uni and my first semester of second year of university, and it was also the year that I discovered BookTube. And I think these two things are really significant in why I decided to read more. With studying English literature at uni, it was the first time that I kind of had to read books by a deadline. So it was the first time that I really had to schedule reading into my day. And also with discovering BookTube, I saw so many people that were reading loads of books a month, and I was just like, hold on, I don't read that many books, but if they can do it, surely I can as well. So what I did with my books for uni was that I would take a look at the page numbers, and I would divide those page numbers by the amount of days that I wanted to take to complete that book. And at that time in my reading life, a week was good, so I tended to divide it by 7, and that was completely manageable. So gradually I went down to 6, 5, 4, etc., depending on how big the book was. I find numerical goals really helpful, so this definitely worked for me. Just being like, okay, I just need to get through 50 pages, that's it, 50 pages, totally manageable. And gradually that just became part of my routine, and I was reading books in fewer and fewer days. So having that numerical goal really helped. It was also in this year that I realized that I could read multiple books at the same time. Now I know this is something that a lot of people feel like they can't do, but I do have some tips on how you can really train yourself to be able to read more than one book at the one time. The reason I got into doing this, before I did this, I was like, no, you can't read more than one book at the one time. That's crazy talk. But because I was reading books for uni, I also wanted to read books for pleasure at the same time. So I gradually got into the habit of reading a uni book and reading a book for pleasure at the same time, and then that kind of increased to maybe 1 uni book and 2 books for pleasure, or 3. Even when you're reading solely for pleasure, this is really achievable as well if you read different kinds of books. So I would never pick up 2 classics at the same time. I would never pick up 2 sci-fi books, 2 romance books, 2 literary fiction books at the same time. I just wouldn't do that. I really liked to mix it up, so there's no way that the books get mixed up in my head. Other things that help with this are reading books in different places. So if you are fortunate enough to have different rooms that you can read in your house, so if you can read one book in the living room, one book that you read in bed, one that you read on your commute, one that you read in the bath, or whatever combination of places that works for you. I find that really helps as well, and you're able to sort of compartmentalize that book in that space. And this isn't something that I really need to do much more now because I've been doing it for such a long time. Either I don't need to think about these things consciously, I just don't really need to do them anymore. Something that also helps is the format of the books that you read. I don't really read that many ebooks anymore, but I think something that does help is having maybe a physical book and an ebook. Again, just making those distinctions between the reading experiences. And I also want to give a big shout out to audiobooks, because audiobooks are definitely something that help me read as much as I do. And yes, they bloody count as reading. Audiobooks are great, and I think they are a great gateway if you are someone that maybe struggles with reading. This was something that I discovered in my first year of uni as well, because, you know, I'm not gonna lie, there were some books that I didn't want to read that were required reading, and it helped to have an audiobook because it was just easier. An audiobook reads far more slowly than my natural reading pace, but it does mean that I can still read while doing other things, and I think that's paramount to how I read so much. So if I am walking somewhere, if I am doing chores, audiobooks are great, and I do at some point want to do a whole video on the different audiobook services that are available and like the pros and cons in each of them. Another tip I have with reading multiple books at the same time is to split your reading up with shorter books. So if you're reading quite a chunky novel, pick up a poetry book or pick up a short kids book just to break it up. And that is something that I will say about my own reading as well. Like, one of the reasons I do read such a high quantity of books is because I do read a lot of like poetry books and kids picture books as well as big chunky novels. Something that I think really helps is making sure that reading remains an enjoyable, luxurious experience for me. So much of my work life is focused on books. I don't want to ever forget that the reason I love books and the reason I surround myself with books is because they bring me so much joy. So I love having cozy reading nights. If you are familiar with Lauren from Lauren in the Books, which you probably are, let's be honest, she hosts incredible cozy reading nights where it's just focused on getting yourself all cozy and getting some good snacks, maybe a nice cup of tea, and really enjoying the book as a form of like self-care. I don't always have the chance to participate in Lauren's events, but I kind of take the spirit of them and incorporate them into my like weekly reading. Reading shouldn't be a chore, it should be a treat. But in saying that, my main tip if you do want to increase the quantity of books that you are reading and increase the time that you spend reading, you've just got to do it. If you are devoting more of your time to reading, that means you have to devote less of your time to something else. I don't really watch that many films, to be honest with you. I would rather spend my time reading a book. That's not to say that I don't watch any films, but I feel like because of the amount of time I devote to reading, I just naturally do less watching films. But I also spend less time doing nothing. Like, I think you'd really be surprised at how much time you spend just sat around not really doing anything, just like on your phone, browsing the internet, not really doing anything at all. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but I think if you realize how much time you spend doing nothing and then use that time to read, it can be really helpful. Also, if in the next year you are deciding to increase the quantity of books you are reading, you're probably going to be increasing the quantity of books that you are getting your hands on. I would really recommend using your local library and supporting them, or supporting your local independent bookstore, or at least physical bookstore, if that is possible for you. Anyways, I hope some of these tips at least were helpful in some way. If you have any questions, do please leave a comment down below. I'd love to have a chat and find out more about what your reading goals are for the new year. If you have any tips, leave them down below for people as well. Anyways, I hope you guys are doing well, and I will talk to you in my next bookish video.